Baby discovered a German shepherd cemented inside a wall. What he did next left everyone in tears. The sound you are about to hear might break your heart. A tiny whimper, barely audible through solid concrete. The story that follows will leave you questioning humanity and then restore your faith in it. If you've ever wondered if miracles still happen in our broken world, this tale will answer that question. Like, share, and let us know where you're listening from as we dive into an unbelievable journey that began with one brave little boy and a dog nobody wanted to save. When 4-year-old Ethan first heard the strange noise coming from behind the crumbling wall, his mother Jamie thought he was imagining things. Children his age often did, but there was something different about the way he tugged at her sleeve that Saturday morning, his small face twisted with concern as they walked along the overgrown path beside the abandoned factory. "Mommy, someone's crying," he whispered, his voice so soft she almost missed it. Jamie smiled down at her son, adjusting her backpack. Their weekend nature walks had become a tradition after the divorce, a way to help Ethan cope with the changes in their life. The abandoned industrial complex wasn't exactly what she'd had in mind for today's adventure, but they'd taken a wrong turn, and now they needed to circle back toward the hiking trail. "It's just the wind, sweetie," she said, glancing at her watch. The building beside them was scheduled for demolition tomorrow, the sign clearly posted on the chain-link fence they'd walked around. "We shouldn't be here anyway. Let's go find those birds you wanted to see." But Ethan didn't move. His tiny hand slipped from hers as he approached the wall, pressing his ear against a section where the concrete had begun to flake away. In all their outings, Jamie had never seen such determination on her son's face. Ethan barely spoke to strangers, rarely made eye contact with anyone outside their immediate family. Yet, here he was, drawn to something with an intensity that made Jamie's skin prickle. "Ethan, come back here right now," she called, her voice sharper than intended. "That building isn't safe." The sky darkened above them as clouds rolled in, casting shadows across the decaying structure. A perfect horror movie setting, Jamie thought with a shiver. The place had been abandoned for years, according to the demolition notice, some failed manufacturing plant that had gone bankrupt during the recession. "It's hurt," Ethan said, his voice suddenly clear and certain. He pressed his small palms against the wall and looked back at his mother with tears forming in his eyes. "Someone's hurt inside." Something in his expression made Jamie pause. Ethan wasn't prone to imagination or drama. If anything, he was the opposite, quiet, methodical, often lost in his own world. The therapist had mentioned signs of selective mutism after the divorce, noting how Ethan had withdrawn further into himself with each passing month. Jamie set down her backpack and approached the wall cautiously. "What exactly do you hear, honey?" Before Ethan could answer, she heard it too. A faint whimpering sound, like an animal in pain. Not the wind, not imagination, something living. "Oh my God," she whispered, pressing her ear against the cold concrete. The sound was clearer now, a weak, desperate cry that raised the hair on her arms. Ethan's small hand found hers in the growing darkness. "We have to help," he said firmly. Jamie pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight, scanning the wall's surface. Most of it seemed solid, but near the bottom, where Ethan had been listening, there was a section that looked different. Newer concrete poorly matched to the older material around it. Her heart began to race as she crouched down, running her fingers along the edge where the materials met. The whimpering grew louder, more desperate. "Hello?" she called out, feeling ridiculous talking to a wall. "Is someone there?" The only response was another whimper, followed by what sounded like a weak scratch against the inside of the wall. Jamie stepped back, her mind racing. This building was set for demolition tomorrow morning. Whatever, or whoever, was inside would be crushed when the wrecking balls arrived. She glanced at Ethan, who stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the wall with an intensity she'd never seen before. "We need to call someone," she said, pulling out her phone again. "The police or animal control or—" "No time," Ethan interrupted, dropping to his knees beside the wall. His small fingers began clawing at the edge where the concrete seemed weakest. "It's dying." Jamie had never heard such urgency in her son's voice. The quiet boy who barely spoke to his teachers was suddenly commanding, focused, transformed by whatever connection he'd formed with the creature behind the wall. She dialed 911 anyway, her fingers trembling, as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. "We're at the old Westbrook manufacturing plant on River Road. There's something alive inside one of the walls. I think it might be an animal, The building's scheduled for demolition tomorrow morning. The dispatcher promised to send someone, but warned it might be a while. A multi-car pileup on the highway had emergency services stretched thin. Thunder rumbled overhead as Jamie ended the call. She looked down at Ethan, who was still frantically scratching at the wall, his fingertips already raw. "Honey, stop. You're hurting yourself," she said, pulling him back gently. "Help is coming." But Ethan's eyes flashed with a determination she couldn't ignore. "It won't be fast enough," he insisted, returning to the wall. Jamie knew he was right. She could hear the weakness in the creature's cries now, the lengthening pauses between them. With a deep breath, she opened her backpack and pulled out the small toolkit she always carried for emergency repairs. It wasn't much, just a hammer, a screwdriver, and a few other basic tools, but it was better than nothing. "Move back, Ethan," she said, positioning the hammer at the weakest point of the concrete. "I'm going to try something." The first blow sent a spray of dust into the air. The second created a small crack. By the fifth, Jamie had broken through to a hollow space behind the wall. The smell hit her first, a sickening combination of waste, decay, and suffering. Then came the sound, a more distinct whimper, still weak but unmistakably a dog. "There's a dog in there," she gasped, widening the hole with the screwdriver's handle. "Someone put a dog inside the wall." Ethan pushed forward, peering into the darkness. His small hands gripped the edges of the opening Jamie had created. "I see his eye," he whispered. Jamie redirected her phone's flashlight into the hole, and her stomach turned. Through the opening, she could see a single eye reflecting the light. A German shepherd's eye, set in a face so emaciated that it barely looked alive. The dog was positioned upright inside a narrow hollow, its body held in place by hardened concrete that encased everything but its muzzle and part of its head. "Oh my God," Jamie breathed, fighting the urge to vomit. Who would do something like this? The reality of what they were seeing crashed over her, like the rain that had begun to fall. Someone had deliberately placed this dog inside the wall while the concrete was still wet, positioning it so that only its face remained exposed, allowing it to breathe but ensuring a slow, torturous death. The dog's eye blinked weakly in the beam of her flashlight. Its whimper had faded to a barely audible sound. "We have to get it out," Jamie said, her voice breaking as she attacked the wall with renewed desperation. "Right now!" But the concrete was thick, and her small hammer made painfully slow progress. The hole was barely large enough for her to see the dog's face, let alone free it from its prison. Rain soaked them both as Jamie continued striking at the wall, her muscles burning with the effort. Ethan stood behind her, completely silent but unwavering, his clothes clinging to his small frame as the storm intensified. After 15 minutes of furious effort, Jamie had only managed to widen the hole by a few inches. She sat back on her heels, fighting back tears of frustration. The dog's eye had closed, its breathing so shallow that she could barely tell it was still alive. "It's not enough," she said, dropping the hammer. "We need real tools, professionals. We need—" She turned to find Ethan gone. "Ethan?" she called out, panic rising in her throat. "Ethan!" The sound of metal scraping against concrete drew her attention to the fence line. Ethan had somehow found his way through the construction barrier and was dragging something heavy across the ground. A rusty crowbar nearly twice his size. Jamie ran to him, relief and amazement battling for dominance. "Where did you find that?" Ethan didn't answer. He simply handed her the crowbar, his eyes conveying everything his voice couldn't. With the crowbar, Jamie made faster progress. Each strike chipped away larger chunks of concrete until finally, after what felt like hours but was probably only 30 minutes, she had created an opening large enough to see the full horror of the situation. The German Shepherd was indeed cemented into the wall, its body held upright in a standing position. Only its head remained mostly free, though even that was partially restricted by concrete that had hardened around its neck like a grotesque collar. The dog's fur was matted with blood and filth, its body so thin that each rib stood out in stark relief against its skin. "Who would do this?" Jamie whispered again, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "Who could be this cruel?" The dog's eyes opened again at the sound of her voice, amber eyes that somehow held no hatred despite everything it had endured. It tried to lift its head but lacked the strength. Something broke inside Jamie as she met that gaze. She attacked the wall with renewed fury, heedless of the debris that flew with each strike, the blisters forming on her hands, the thunder crashing overhead. Ethan stood beside her, passing her water from their backpack when she paused to catch her breath, wiping rain from her eyes when it blinded her. Not once did he suggest giving up or waiting for help. Not once did he back away from the horror before them. After almost an hour, Jamie had created a hole large enough to reach the dog's face. She carefully extended her hand, letting the animal catch her scent before gently touching its muzzle. "We're going to get you out," she promised, her voice thick with emotion. "Just hold on a little longer." The dog's tongue weakly emerged to lick her fingers, a gesture of trust so profound that Jamie had to turn away to hide her tears. Ethan moved forward then, approaching the opening without hesitation. Before Jamie could stop him, he had placed his small hand on the dog's head, his touch infinitely gentle. "His name is Hero," Ethan said quietly, as if the dog had somehow told him this secret. Jamie stared at her son in wonder. "How do you know that, sweetie?" Ethan shrugged, still looking at the dog. "He told me." In any other circumstance, Jamie might have questioned this statement, might have worried about her son's grip on reality. But there was something about the certainty in his voice, the connection between boy and dog that seemed to transcend normal understanding. The distant wail of sirens finally broke through the sound of rain. Jamie hadn't realized how long they had been working until she checked her phone. Nearly 2 hours had passed since her call to emergency services. "Help is coming," she told both Ethan and the dog. "Just a little longer." The dog's eyes closed again, its breathing growing more labored. Jamie feared they were already too late. When the first responders arrived, 2 police officers followed by a fire truck, they found Jamie and Ethan soaked to the skin, covered in concrete dust and mud, still working desperately to free the animal from its prison. "Ma'am, you need to step back," one of the officers said, approaching cautiously. "That building is condemned. You shouldn't be—" His words died as he saw what they had uncovered. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, reaching for his radio. "Dispatch, we're going to need animal control and probably a vet at this location. And tell demolition to hold off. We've got a situation here." The firefighters approached next, their expressions changing from confusion to horror as they understood the scene before them. "How long has it been in there?" the fire captain asked, already directing his team to bring equipment. "We don't know," Jamie answered, her voice hoarse from crying. "We just found it, but the concrete looks newer than the rest of the wall, and the building's been abandoned for years." The captain shook his head in disgust. "Some people don't deserve to breathe the same air as the rest of us," he muttered, before turning to his team. "Jensen, Ramirez, get the concrete saw. Morrison, call Dr. Patel. Tell her it's an emergency rescue." As the firefighters sprang into action, one of the police officers gently led Jamie and Ethan away from the wall. "You've done everything you could," he said kindly. "Let the professionals take over now." But Ethan wouldn't budge. "No," he said firmly, planting himself beside the opening they'd created. "He needs me here." The officer looked to Jamie for help, but she simply shook her head. "He stays," she said quietly. "We both do." Something in her expression must have conveyed the depth of their commitment, because the officer merely nodded and stepped back. The rescue operation intensified as more personnel arrived. The concrete saw screamed against the wall, carefully cutting around the dog's body, while a veterinarian waited nearby with medical equipment. Animal control officers conferred with police, taking photographs and collecting evidence of what was clearly a case of deliberate animal cruelty. Through it all, Ethan remained beside the opening, one hand extended to maintain contact with the dog he'd named Hero. He spoke softly, words too quiet for anyone else to hear, but whatever he was saying seemed to keep the animal conscious. "Has your son always had this connection with animals?" the veterinarian, Dr. Patel, asked Jamie as they watched the rescue effort. Jamie shook her head. "We don't even have pets," she admitted. "His father was allergic, and after the divorce, I just never thought about getting one." Dr. Patel nodded thoughtfully. "Some children have a natural empathy that goes beyond normal boundaries," she said. "It's rare, but I've seen it before, usually in children who have experienced their own trauma." Jamie wanted to object to this characterization of her son. Ethan had been through a divorce, yes, but she'd done everything in her power to shield him from trauma. Yet, looking at him now, the fierce determination in his small face, the way he seemed to understand exactly what the dog needed, she wondered if there was something she'd missed. After nearly an hour of careful cutting and extraction, the firefighters had removed enough concrete to begin easing the dog from its prison. What emerged was even more heartbreaking than what they'd glimpsed through the hole. a once powerful German shepherd reduced to skin and bones, its coat matted with blood, patches of fur missing where the concrete had been pressed directly against its skin. Despite its condition, the dog made no aggressive moves as it was finally freed. Instead, it collapsed onto its side, too weak to stand but still conscious, its amber eyes finding Ethan immediately. Dr. Patel moved in quickly, attaching an IV line and beginning emergency treatment, while the firefighters cleared a path to the waiting ambulance. "Will he live?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling for the first time since they'd discovered the dog. Dr. Patel looked up from her work, her face grave but kind. "I don't know, sweetheart. He's very sick, but we're going to do everything we can." As they prepared to transport the dog to the emergency veterinary hospital, one of the animal control officers approached Jamie with something in his hand, a collar that had been partially embedded in the concrete around the dog's neck. "We managed to extract this," he said, holding it out to her. "There's a tag with a name." Jamie took the filthy collar, rubbing away grime to reveal a simple metal tag. Engraved on its surface was a single word: Atlas. She looked over at Ethan, who was still watching the veterinarian work on the dog he'd called Hero. She wondered again how he had known, or thought he'd known, the dog's name. "The tag says Atlas," she told him gently. Ethan nodded, unsurprised. "That's his outside name," he said cryptically, "but inside, he's Hero." Before Jamie could ask what he meant, the veterinarian announced they were ready to transport. "We need to get him to the hospital immediately," Dr. Patel said. "Every minute counts." The police officer who had first arrived on scene approached Jamie. "We'll need statements from both of you," he said, "but it can wait until tomorrow. You should go home, get cleaned up, get some rest." "We're going with him," Ethan said, his voice leaving no room for argument as he pointed to the dog being loaded onto a stretcher. The officer looked to Jamie, who merely shrugged in resignation. "Apparently we're going to the veterinary hospital," she said. As they followed the emergency transport, Jamie wrapped a blanket around Ethan's shoulders, trying to process everything that had happened. In the span of a few hours, her quiet, withdrawn son had transformed before her eyes, speaking more words than he had in months, showing more determination than she'd ever witnessed, forming a connection she couldn't begin to understand. And somewhere behind them, sealed in concrete and darkness, were the answers to questions she was only beginning to form. Who would do this to an animal? Why this dog? And how had Ethan known exactly where to find him? The rain had stopped by the time they reached the veterinary hospital, but the sky remained dark with clouds that mirrored the uncertainty hanging over them. As Atlas was rushed inside on a stretcher, Ethan clutched Jamie's hand tightly. "He's not going to die," he said with absolute certainty. "He can't." Jamie squeezed his hand, wishing she shared his confidence. "The doctors will do everything they can, sweetie." Ethan looked up at her, his eyes somehow older than his 4 years should allow. "You don't understand, Mom," he said quietly. "We need each other." And as they walked through the hospital doors, following the path of the dog who had been buried alive, and the boy who had somehow heard his cry through solid concrete, Jamie couldn't shake the feeling that her son was right, that this was only the beginning of a connection that would change all their lives in ways she couldn't yet imagine. The waiting room of Mountain Valley Emergency Veterinary Hospital felt colder than it should have. Jamie wrapped her arms around herself, watching Ethan press his small face against the window of the double doors where they'd taken Atlas. Nearly 3 hours had passed since they'd arrived, and still no word on the dog's condition. "Sweetheart, come sit down," Jamie said, patting the chair beside her. "The doctors need space to work." Ethan shook his head without turning around. "He's scared," he whispered. "He doesn't know where he is." Jamie sighed, too exhausted to argue. The events of the day had left her physically and emotionally drained, yet Ethan seemed fueled by some invisible force. He hadn't eaten, hadn't rested, hadn't moved from his vigil, except when physically pulled away by the nurses who needed to pass through the doors. "Mrs. Parker?" Jamie looked up to see Dr. Patel standing in the doorway, her scrub stained with what Jamie presumed was Atlas's blood. The veterinarian's expression gave nothing away, but the tightness around her eyes suggested the news wasn't good. "How is he?" Jamie asked, rising to her feet. Dr. Patel gestured for her to follow. "Could we speak privately for a moment?" "No." Ethan's voice cut through the quiet waiting room as he turned from the window. "I want to hear too." Dr. Patel looked at Jamie questioningly. Jamie nodded, knowing there was no point in sheltering Ethan now, not after everything he'd witnessed. "All right," Dr. Patel said, taking a seat across from them. "I won't lie to you. Atlas's condition is critical. Beyond the obvious malnutrition and dehydration, he has multiple infections from his wounds, some of which appear to be deliberate injuries inflicted before he was placed in that wall." Ethan's face remained oddly calm, but Jamie felt her stomach turn. "Someone hurt him on purpose?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Dr. Patel nodded grimly. "I've contacted the police with my findings. This wasn't just a case of abandonment or neglect. The injuries I'm seeing suggest systematic torture, burns, cuts, even what appears to be surgical experimentation." "Surgical?" Jamie repeated, feeling lightheaded. "There are scars that indicate someone performed procedures on this dog, precise incisions that have healed over, particularly around the head and spine." Dr. Patel's professional demeanor cracked slightly. "In 20 years of veterinary medicine, I've never seen anything like it." Ethan stood perfectly still, absorbing every word without the emotional reaction Jamie would expect from a 4-year-old. His composure was almost as unsettling as the doctor's description. "Can you fix him?" he asked simply. Dr. Patel hesitated. "We're doing everything we can, but I have to be honest, his chances aren't good, maybe 30% at best. He needs emergency surgery to address some of the internal damage, but he's too weak to survive anesthesia right now." "So we wait?" Jamie asked. "We stabilize him first. Fluids, antibiotics, pain management. If he makes it through the night, we'll reassess in the morning." Dr. Patel looked directly at Ethan. "I wish I had better news." Ethan met her gaze without flinching. "He'll make it," he said with absolute certainty. "He just needs to know someone's waiting for him." Dr. Patel smiled gently. "You really care about him, don't you? Even though you just met." "I've known him before," Ethan replied cryptically, then walked back to his position by the window before anyone could question him further. Dr. Patel gave Jamie a concerned look. "Children often have interesting ways of processing trauma," she said quietly. "His empathy is remarkable, though. Has he always been this way with animals?" Jamie shook her head, watching her son press his palm against the glass. "He's usually withdrawn, especially since the divorce. He barely speaks to anyone outside our family. Today is the most I've heard him talk in months." "Some children find it easier to connect with animals than people," Dr. Patel offered. "And some animals respond to children in ways they don't respond to adults." "You mean like therapy dogs?" "Something like that." Dr. Patel stood up. "I should get back to Atlas. One of the nurses will update you if there's any change." As the veterinarian turned to leave, Ethan spoke again without turning from the window. "Can I see him?" Dr. Patel paused. "He's in intensive care, and his immune system is compromised. We don't usually allow—" "Please," Ethan interrupted, finally turning to face her. "He needs to know I'm here." Jamie had never heard her son beg for anything, not even when his father left. The quiet desperation in his voice now broke something inside her. "Dr. Patel," she said, "I know it's against protocol, but is there any way? Just for a minute?" The veterinarian studied Ethan's face for a long moment before sighing. 5 minutes, she conceded. "You'll need to wear protective gear, and you can't touch him directly because of the infection risk. But you can let him see you." Ethan nodded solemnly. "Thank you." 10 minutes later, dressed in a paper gown, mask, and gloves that dwarfed his small hands, Ethan stood beside Atlas's treatment table. The German Shepherd lay unconscious, connected to monitors and IVs, his emaciated body barely making a bump under the warming blanket. Only his face was visible, an oxygen mask secured over his muzzle. Jamie hung back by the door, watching her son approach the dog with a reverence that seemed far beyond his years. Ethan didn't try to touch Atlas, respecting Dr. Patel's instructions. Instead, he simply stood where the dog could see him if he opened his eyes. "I'm here," Ethan said softly. "You're not alone anymore." Whether it was coincidence or something more, Atlas's eyelids fluttered at the sound of Ethan's voice. They opened just a crack, revealing a sliver of amber beneath. Dr. Patel, who had been checking one of the monitors, froze in place. "That's the first time he's shown any response since we sedated him," she said, her voice tinged with surprise. Ethan nodded as if this were exactly what he'd expected. "He was waiting for me." For the next 5 minutes, Ethan spoke to Atlas in a low, steady voice. Not baby talk or the high-pitched tones adults often used with animals, but a calm, mature cadence that might have been used by someone much older. Jamie couldn't hear everything he said, but she caught phrases like "not your fault" and "never again." And, most strikingly, "I remember too." When the nurse finally indicated their time was up, Ethan didn't protest. He simply leaned close to Atlas's ear and whispered something that made the dog's tail twitch beneath the blanket. The smallest movement, but movement nonetheless. As they left the treatment area, Dr. Patel pulled Jamie aside. "I don't want to give false hope," she said quietly, "but Atlas's vital signs improved while your son was with him. His heart rate stabilized, his oxygen levels increased. It's unusual." "Ethan has that effect on people too," Jamie admitted. "He's quiet, but when he does speak, people listen. His teachers say he has an old soul." Dr. Patel smiled. "The bond between children and animals can be powerful medicine, perhaps more powerful than anything in my medical arsenal." Back in the waiting room, Jamie tried once more to convince Ethan to go home. "We can come back first thing in the morning," she promised. "You need rest. We both do." Ethan shook his head stubbornly. If we leave, he might think we're not coming back. The simplicity of his logic made Jamie's heart ache. How many times had Ethan himself worried about the same thing since his father walked out? How many nights had he lain awake, wondering if the people who were supposed to love him would simply disappear? "Okay," she relented, settling back into the uncomfortable waiting room chair. "We'll stay a little longer." Hours passed. The waiting room emptied as other pet owners either took their animals home or left them in the hospital's care. Jamie dozed off intermittently, jerking awake whenever the doors opened or a phone rang. Each time, she found Ethan in the same position, sitting cross-legged on the floor by the treatment room doors, his eyes open, his small body completely still. It was just past 3 a.m. when Dr. Patel emerged again, looking exhausted but cautiously optimistic. "He's stabilized enough for surgery," she announced. "His fever broke an hour ago, and his blood work is showing improvement. It's still risky, but if we wait any longer, we risk further complications." "How long will it take?" Jamie asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "At least 4 hours, possibly longer. You should really go home now. There's nothing you can do here, and the surgery waiting area isn't set up for overnight stays." Jamie looked at Ethan, expecting another refusal. To her surprise, he stood up and took her hand. "We can go now," he said. "He knows what he has to do." Confused but relieved, Jamie gathered their belongings. "We'll come back in the morning?" Dr. Patel nodded. "The surgery should be finished by 8 a.m., though Atlas will be in recovery for some time after that." As they turned to leave, Ethan looked back at the treatment room doors one last time. "He'll be okay," he said, though whether he was reassuring Dr. Patel or himself, Jamie couldn't tell. The drive home passed in silence, Ethan staring out the window at the pre-dawn darkness. Jamie's mind raced with questions she didn't know how to ask. How had her son known exactly where to find Atlas? How had he known the dog's name? Or rather, given him a name that seemed to resonate so deeply? And what had he meant when he said, "I've known him before"? When they finally arrived home, Ethan walked straight to his bedroom without a word. Jamie followed, expecting to find him getting ready for bed. Instead, he had pulled out his coloring supplies and was furiously drawing on a large sheet of paper. "Sweetie, it's almost 4 in the morning," Jamie said gently. "You need to sleep." Ethan didn't look up from his drawing. Can't. Not yet. Too exhausted to argue, Jamie sat on the edge of his bed, watching as an image took shape under her son's determined hands. A German shepherd, not skeletal and wounded like Atlas, but strong and healthy, standing protectively beside a small boy. "That's beautiful," Jamie said softly. "Is that you and Atlas?" Ethan nodded, adding details to the dog's face, amber eyes that seemed to jump off the page with their intensity. "When he gets better," he explained, "we need to be ready." "Ready for what, honey?" Ethan finally looked up, his eyes far too serious for a child his age. "For them." A chill ran down Jamie's spine. "Who is them?" "The bad people." Ethan returned to his drawing, adding dark shapes in the background, human silhouettes that loomed ominously behind the boy and dog. "The ones who hurt him. The ones who took the others." Jamie's mouth went dry. "What others, Ethan?" But Ethan had retreated back into himself, focused entirely on his drawing, adding details with meticulous care despite his obvious exhaustion. Jamie waited for several minutes, but it was clear the conversation was over. Finally, when Ethan's head began to nod despite his best efforts, Jamie gently took the crayons from his hands. "Time for bed, sweetheart. You can finish in the morning." This time he didn't resist. He crawled under the covers fully clothed, his eyelids heavy with the sleep he had been fighting for hours. Jamie tucked the blanket around him, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "Mom?" His voice was barely a whisper as he teetered on the edge of consciousness. "Yes, honey. When Atlas comes home, they'll come looking for him." His eyes closed, his breathing deepening. "But we'll be ready." Then he was asleep, leaving Jamie alone with questions that multiplied like shadows in the pre-dawn light. Who had done this to Atlas? What others was Ethan talking about? And most disturbing of all, who might come looking for a dog that someone had gone to such lengths to torture and then entomb alive in concrete? Jamie crept out of Ethan's room, leaving the door cracked as she always did. In the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. Perhaps Ethan was simply processing the trauma of what they'd witnessed, creating a narrative that helped him cope with the horror of finding an animal tortured and left to die. But something nagged at her, something that couldn't be easily explained away. The certainty with which Ethan had located Atlas, the immediate bond between them, the dog's response to her son's presence. There was more here than met the eye, some connection she couldn't understand, but couldn't dismiss either. Her phone buzzed with a text message, startling her from her thoughts. The number was unfamiliar, but the message made her heart race. "This is Dr. Patel. Atlas is in surgery. Something you should know. The microchip we found isn't standard pet ID, military grade. Someone will contact you tomorrow. Don't tell anyone about the dog. Not safe." Jamie stared at the message, reading it 3 times to be sure she wasn't hallucinating from exhaustion. Military grade microchip? Not safe? The chill that had started when Ethan mentioned them now spread throughout her body. She glanced toward her son's room, where he slept peacefully despite his warnings about people coming to look for Atlas. How could he have known? What exactly had they stumbled into today? With trembling fingers, Jamie typed a reply. "What do you mean, not safe? Who's coming tomorrow?" 3 dots appeared, indicating Dr. Patel was typing. Then they disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, a simple message came through. "Found something during surgery. Can't talk now. Keep your son close." Jamie set the phone down, her mind spinning with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. She moved to the window, pulling back the curtain to peer into the darkness outside. The street was empty, quiet, normal, but suddenly it didn't feel safe anymore. She checked the locks on the doors and windows, drew all the curtains, then grabbed a kitchen knife before settling on the couch, where she could see both the front door and the hallway to Ethan's room. She wouldn't sleep tonight, couldn't sleep with Dr. Patel's warning echoing in her mind, and Ethan's drawings of shadowy figures burned into her memory. As the first hint of dawn lightened the sky outside, Jamie made a decision. As soon as Atlas was stable enough, they would take him and leave, go somewhere new, somewhere no one could find them. Because whatever secret the German Shepherd carried within him, whatever horror he had escaped from, had followed him out of that concrete tomb, and now it was coming for them too. In his bedroom, Ethan slept soundly for the first time in months, one hand curled around his drawing, the other reaching out toward an invisible presence beside his bed. And miles away, on an operating table, under bright surgical lights, a German Shepherd's heart suddenly strengthened, his vital signs improving with each passing minute, as if some distant connection was feeding him the will to survive. Dr. Patel watched the monitors in amazement as Atlas defied every medical expectation. "Fight, boy," she whispered, glancing at the strange device she'd extracted from beneath his shoulder blade. A microchip unlike any she'd ever seen, with markings that sent fear through her when she recognized their significance. "Whatever they did to you, whatever they want from you, fight." Morning arrived with harsh clarity, sunlight streaming through the cracks in Jamie's curtains. She jolted awake on the couch, the kitchen knife still clutched in her hand. For a moment, disorientation clouded her mind. Had yesterday been a nightmare? But the dried concrete dust under her fingernails and the ache in her muscles confirmed everything. She checked her phone, 7:43 a.m., and 3 missed calls from the veterinary hospital. Her heart jumped into her throat as she quickly called back. "Mountain Valley Emergency," answered a crisp voice. "This is Jamie Parker," she said, her voice rough with sleep. "I had some missed calls about Atlas. the German Shepherd brought in yesterday? One moment, I'll transfer you to Dr. Patel. The hold music lasted only seconds before Dr. Patel's tired voice came through. Mrs. Parker, I've been trying to reach you. I'm sorry, I must have fallen asleep. How is he? Did the surgery? He's alive, Dr. Patel interrupted. And that's nothing short of remarkable. Mrs. Parker, I need you to come to the hospital as soon as possible, not through the main entrance. There's a staff door on the east side of the building. I'll meet you there at 9 a.m. sharp. Jamie's grip tightened on the phone. What's going on? Your text last night? Not over the phone, Dr. Patel said quietly. Bring your son. Come alone. And Mrs. Parker, if anyone asks you about Atlas, you haven't heard from us. The official record shows he didn't survive surgery. The line went dead before Jamie could respond. She stared at her phone, a cold knot of fear forming in her stomach. Whatever she and Ethan had stumbled into yesterday was far more complicated than animal cruelty. She moved quickly to Ethan's room, where he was already awake and getting dressed, as if he somehow knew what was happening. We need to go see Atlas, he said simply, pulling on his shoes. Jamie hesitated. Part of her wanted to grab Ethan and run in the opposite direction, away from whatever danger lurked around this mysterious dog. But the determination in her son's eyes told her that wasn't an option. We're going, she assured him. But, Ethan, I need you to tell me the truth about something. He looked up, waiting. Do you know something about Atlas? Something you haven't told me? For a long moment, Ethan was silent, his small face unreadable. Then he walked to his bed and pulled out the drawing he'd made last night, handing it to her without a word. Jamie examined it more carefully in the morning light. What she'd taken for simple shadows behind the figures of the boy and dog were actually men in uniform, drawn with a child's hand, but unmistakably military, with weapons and stern faces. And on Atlas's head, Ethan had drawn something she hadn't noticed last night, a small device attached between the dog's ears. What is this? She asked, pointing to the device. The thing that helps him talk to me, Ethan said matter-of-factly. The thing the bad people put inside him. Jamie's blood ran cold. How do you know about this, Ethan? He shrugged, the gesture painfully childlike in contrast to his words. I've seen it before, in my dreams. Before Jamie could question him further, her phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Patel. Are you coming? Don't delay. We'll talk more later, Jamie promised, tucking the drawing into her pocket. Right now, we need to go. They drove in tense silence, Jamie constantly checking her rear-view mirror for signs of being followed. The streets looked normal, people walking dogs, joggers enjoying the morning sunshine, mail carriers beginning their routes. Yet everything felt threatening now, as if danger lurked behind the most innocent facades. The veterinary hospital looked different in daylight, less imposing, more clinical. Jamie parked not in the main lot, but in a secluded area near the dumpsters, as Dr. Patel had instructed via text. The east entrance was unmarked, just a plain metal door that looked like it might be a service entrance. Dr. Patel opened it before they could knock. The veterinarian looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she hadn't slept since they had last seen her. Quickly, she said, ushering them inside and locking the door behind them. We don't have much time. She led them through a maze of corridors, bypassing the main treatment areas and reception desk. Other staff members glanced at them curiously, but said nothing as Dr. Patel guided them to a small room at the back of the facility. Not a regular treatment room, but what appeared to be a storage space converted for medical use. Inside, lying on a makeshift bed of blankets, was Atlas. The German Shepherd looked markedly different from the previous night. Though still dangerously thin, he seemed more present, his eyes alert as they entered. A large bandage covered his chest and shoulder, and various monitoring equipment beeped softly around him. But what struck Jamie most was the change in his demeanor. This was no longer a dying animal, but a watchful, intelligent presence. Ethan broke away from Jamie's grasp and went straight to Atlas. The dog's tail thumped weakly against the blankets, his amber eyes fixed on the boy with unmistakable recognition. He knows you, Dr. Patel said, though it was obvious to everyone. Of course he does, Ethan replied, settling cross-legged beside the dog's bed. He placed his hand gently near Atlas's muzzle, careful not to disturb the bandages. Atlas responded by licking his fingers once, then laying his head down as if exhausted by even that small gesture. Dr. Patel turned to Jamie, lowering her voice. During surgery, I found something embedded beneath his shoulder blade. At first, I thought it was shrapnel or some kind of tracking device, but it's much more sophisticated. She handed Jamie a small plastic container. Inside was what looked like a microchip, but unlike any pet microchip Jamie had ever seen. This was larger, with visible circuitry and strange markings etched into its casing. "That's military," Jamie said, recognizing the style of the serial number from her brother's time in the service. Dr. Patel nodded grimly. "Not just military, classified. Look at the prefix." Jamie examined the markings more closely. "DARPA N? What does that mean?" "Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, Neural Division," Dr. Patel replied. "My brother works in military technology. I've seen these markings before, in some of his journals. This is cutting-edge neuroscience, the kind of thing they're developing for battlefield applications." Jamie looked from the chip to Atlas, who lay peacefully as Ethan stroked his ears. What would something like this be doing in a dog? "That's what concerns me," Dr. Patel lowered her voice further. "This morning, a man came to the hospital claiming to be from animal control. He asked specifically about Atlas, wanted to see all his medical records. His ID looked legitimate, but when I called the county office to verify, they had no record of an employee by that name." The cold knot in Jamie's stomach tightened. "What did you tell him?" "That the dog died during surgery, that we were preparing the body for cremation." Dr. Patel glanced at Ethan, who was whispering something to Atlas. He seemed to accept it, but I don't think we have much time. Whoever this man represents will want to confirm the death, or retrieve the body. "What do we do?" Dr. Patel handed Jamie a file folder. "These are Atlas's medical records, or at least a version of them. I've documented everything except the microchip and prepared transfer papers. I have a colleague who runs a private veterinary practice about 3 hours north of here, in the mountains. He's agreed to take Atlas, no questions asked." Jamie took the folder with trembling hands. "You want us to take him? Now? It's not safe here anymore, for him or for you." Dr. Patel looked pointedly at Ethan. "Your son has a connection with this dog that I can't explain medically, but I saw what happened during surgery. Atlas's vitals were failing until exactly 4:17 a.m. Then, suddenly, everything stabilized. His heart strengthened, his bleeding slowed, his body began fighting the infection more effectively. When I checked the monitors in your son's treatment room, they showed him entering deep sleep at 4:16 a.m. Jamie remembered the moment Ethan had finally given in to exhaustion, collapsing into sleep with his drawing clutched in his hand. "You think they're connected somehow? That's impossible." "A month ago, I would have agreed with you." Dr. Patel's expression was deadly serious. "But the technology in that chip, it's designed to create neural links. The research I've seen suggests they're working on ways to enhance communication between handlers and service animals, perhaps even enable direct brain-to-brain connections." "Between humans and dogs?" Jamie couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "Between any compatible neural systems." Dr. Patel glanced again at Ethan and Atlas. "Children's brains are more plastic, more adaptable, if Atlas was part of an experimental program using this technology." "You think they were experimenting on children too?" Jamie felt sick at the implication. Dr. Patel shook her head. "I don't know, but I do know that your son reacted to this dog in a way I've never seen before, and Atlas responded to him in a way that defies medical explanation." Before Jamie could respond, the door opened and a young veterinary technician poked her head in. "Dr. Patel, there are 2 men at the front desk asking about the German Shepherd from yesterday. They say they're from Homeland Security." Dr. Patel's expression didn't change, but Jamie saw a flash of fear in her eyes. "Tell them I'll be right there, and prep the deceased canine in room 6 for their inspection." The technician nodded and withdrew. Dr. Patel turned back to Jamie, her voice urgent. "Room 6 contains the body of a German Shepherd that died last night from injuries sustained in a car accident. Similar coloring to Atlas, similar injuries. It won't fool them for long, but it might buy you time." She handed Jamie a set of car keys. "My SUV is parked behind the building, by the dumpsters. It has darkened windows and a compartment in the back designed for transporting animals. Take Atlas there while I distract these men. My colleague is expecting you by this afternoon." "I can't take your car," Jamie protested. "You have to. They might know your vehicle." Dr. Patel reached into her pocket and pulled out a syringe. "This is a mild sedative for Atlas, just enough to keep him calm during the journey. Don't give him anything else, even if he seems in pain. The drugs from surgery need to clear his system." The reality of what was happening crashed over Jamie like a wave. 24 hours ago, she and Ethan had been taking a simple nature walk. Now they were preparing to flee with a dog implanted with military technology, pursued by people who had gone to extraordinary lengths to silence both the animal and whatever secrets he carried. Dr. Patel, I don't know if we can... Mom, Ethan's voice cut through her fear. He had stood up from beside Atlas, his small face set with determination. We have to help him. He helped the others escape. Both women turned to look at the boy. What others, sweetie? Jamie asked, the question she'd tried to ask last night. The other dogs, the other kids. Ethan spoke with absolute certainty. They hurt them too. Atlas helped them get away before the bad men could finish the experiments. That's why they put him in the wall. They wanted him to die slowly so he would suffer. Jamie looked to Dr. Patel, whose face had gone pale. How could he know any of this? The veterinarian whispered. Before either woman could question him further, a voice came over the hospital intercom. Dr. Patel to the front desk, please. Dr. Patel to the front desk. We're out of time, Dr. Patel said, moving quickly to the door. Get Atlas to the vehicle. Take the service corridor to the left, then right at the end. It leads directly to the back exit. Thank you, Jamie said, her voice breaking with the weight of what the veterinarian was risking for them. If these people are as dangerous as we think... I'll be fine, Dr. Patel interrupted, though her tense expression suggested otherwise. Just keep that dog and your son safe. And Jamie, find out what Atlas knows. Whatever these people are doing, it's worth killing to protect. With that, she was gone, leaving Jamie alone with Ethan and a dog who apparently held government secrets inside his traumatized body. Ethan, help me get the blankets, Jamie said, falling back on practicality to keep her fear at bay. We need to move Atlas very carefully. To her surprise, Atlas struggled to his feet as soon as they approached with the blankets. Though clearly weak and in pain, he stood on trembling legs, looking at Ethan as if waiting for instructions. He knows we have to go, Ethan said, gently supporting the dog's thin frame. He can walk a little. Jamie stared in disbelief. This animal had been at death's door last night, had undergone major surgery just hours ago. Yet here he was, standing on his own four paws, driven by some force she couldn't understand. Okay, she said, gathering the remaining medical supplies Dr. Patel had left. Let's go, slowly. The journey through the service corridor seemed to take forever, each step an agony as Atlas stumbled along between them. Ethan walked beside the dog, one hand resting lightly on his back, whispering encouragement that seemed to give Atlas impossible strength. The back exit opened onto a small staff parking area, just as Dr. Patel had described. An SUV with darkened windows sat beside the dumpsters, keys already in the ignition. Jamie opened the rear compartment, which had been prepared with blankets and even a water bowl. Up you go, she said, trying to help Atlas into the vehicle. The dog managed the step with surprising determination, collapsing onto the blankets once inside. Ethan climbed in beside him, settling on the floor of the compartment, rather than on the actual seat. You need to buckle up properly, Jamie insisted, maternal instinct momentarily overriding their bizarre situation. I need to stay with him, Ethan replied firmly. He's scared. Jamie didn't have time to argue. She closed the compartment, ensuring both Ethan and Atlas were hidden from view, then slipped into the driver's seat. As she started the engine, she caught sight of two men in dark suits exiting the front of the hospital, moving with urgent purpose toward the parking lot. She pulled out of the staff area as calmly as she could manage, avoiding eye contact as she passed the men. In her peripheral vision, she saw one of them speaking into a radio, the other scanning the parked cars with methodical attention. Stay down, she whispered, though Ethan couldn't hear her from the back compartment. She drove exactly at the speed limit, hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel, the perfect picture of an ordinary driver with nothing to hide. Only when the hospital had disappeared from her rearview mirror did she allow herself to breathe. Ethan, she called back, how's Atlas doing? He's hurting, but trying not to show it, came the response. He says the chip in his head is working again. Jamie nearly swerved off the road. He says? Ethan, what do you mean? There was a pause before Ethan answered, his voice matter of fact. I can hear him, Mom. Not like talking with words, but I know what he's thinking. The chip helps him share his thoughts with me. Jamie's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Dr. Patel's explanation about neural links suddenly seemed less like science fiction and more like a terrifying reality. What is he thinking right now? Another pause. He's remembering the place where they kept him. A room with no windows, lots of other dogs, people in white coats. They put things in his head while he was awake. Ethan's voice wavered slightly. It hurt him a lot, Mom. Jamie swallowed hard, fighting nausea. Does he know who did this to him? Men with guns, scientists. He doesn't know their names, just their smells. A longer pause this time. He says there were children there too, in a different part of the building. He could smell them, hear them crying sometimes. The implications made Jamie's blood run cold. What kind of facility experimented on both animals and children? And how had Atlas ended up cemented into a wall scheduled for demolition? Ask him how he escaped, Jamie said, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan didn't respond immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter, as if he was concentrating hard. One of the scientists helped him. A woman. She didn't like what they were doing. She put something inside Atlas, information about the experiments. Then she helped him and 2 other dogs get away. The microchip Dr. Patel found? No, something else. Something hidden inside him. Ethan's voice took on a strange cadence, almost as if he was quoting someone else. Evidence of what they were doing, names, places, things that would shut the program down if the right people found out. Jamie checked her mirrors nervously, half expecting to see black SUVs in pursuit. Does he know what happened to the other dogs that escaped, or the woman who helped them? Silence from the back. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. They didn't make it. The weight of those 4 words hung in the air as Jamie merged onto the highway heading north, toward the mountains and the sanctuary Dr. Patel had arranged. She thought about turning around, going to the police or the FBI, telling them everything. But if the people looking for Atlas had connections to Homeland Security, who could they trust? Mom, Ethan called from the back after several minutes of silence. Atlas wants to know where we're going. To a safe place, Jamie answered, hoping it was true. A doctor who can help him. He says it's not just him they want. Ethan's voice had taken on that odd, distant quality again. They want me too now, because of the connection. Jamie's heart skipped a beat. What connection, Ethan? The one that happened when I first heard him through the wall. Ethan spoke slowly, as if explaining something obvious. His chip connected with my brain. That's why I could hear him when no one else could. That's why he got stronger when I stayed near him. The road ahead blurred as tears filled Jamie's eyes. Her son, her quiet, withdrawn little boy, had somehow formed a neural connection with an experimental military animal. And now, according to Ethan, the people responsible wanted both of them. We should be safe once we get to the mountains, she said, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. Dr. Patel's friend will help us figure out what to do next. From the back came a sound that wasn't Ethan, a soft whine that transitioned into something almost like a wordless hum. Atlas was making a sound Jamie had never heard from a dog before, a sound that raised the hair on the back of her neck. He's trying to talk, Ethan explained, with the same eerie calmness. The chip lets him make sounds that are almost like words when he tries really hard. Jamie glanced in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of her son sitting on the floor of the compartment, Atlas's head in his lap. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on Ethan's face with an intensity that transcended animal intelligence, a look of profound understanding and connection. What's he trying to say? Jamie asked, her voice barely a whisper. Ethan stroked Atlas's head gently, his small fingers tracing the spot between the dog's ears where he'd drawn the device in his picture. He's saying, thank you, for saving him, for believing him. The dog made the strange sound again, a whine that modulated in pitch and tone, almost forming syllables. Ethan nodded as if he understood perfectly. And he's saying we need to be careful at the doctor's house, he translated, because they might be waiting for us there too. Jamie's foot eased off the accelerator, doubt flooding her mind. What if this was a trap? What if Dr. Patel's colleague was part of whatever program had tortured Atlas? What if there was nowhere safe to go? Ask him what we should do instead, she said, scanning the highway for the next exit. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his head tilted as if listening to something only he could hear. When he spoke again, his voice carried a mixture of his own childish tones and something older, wiser. Keep driving north, but not to the doctor. There's a place in the mountains Atlas remembers from before, a cabin by a lake where the woman scientist took him once. He thinks he can find it if we get close enough. Ethan paused, then added, and Mom, he says we need to call someone named Marcus. He was the woman's friend. He knows about the programs. He can help us. Marcus who? How do we find him? Another pause, another strange communication between boy and dog. Atlas doesn't know his last name, but the scientist wrote it down with all the other information hidden inside him. Jamie's mind raced. Inside him? You mean we need to extract whatever she hid? It's in his collar, Ethan said simply. The one they found with him. There's a hidden pocket with a memory card. Jamie almost swerved again, remembering the filthy collar the animal control officer had shown her, the one with the tag that read Atlas. She'd completely forgotten about it in the chaos that followed. Ethan, I don't think we have his collar. The animal control officers took it as evidence. Ethan shook his head. No, Mom. Dr. Patel put it in the bag with his medicine. I saw it. Jamie glanced at the medical supplies bag sitting on the passenger seat. Had Dr. Patel included the collar? And if so, had she known about its importance? Check the bag when we stop, she said, making a snap decision. For now, we keep driving north. We'll find somewhere to rest and make a plan. In the back, Atlas made that strange, almost speaking sound again, longer this time, with clearer modulation. Jamie didn't need Ethan's translation to understand that the dog was trying to express urgency. He says they're already looking for us, Ethan confirmed. They have ways to track the chip inside him. We don't have much time. Jamie pressed the accelerator, pushing Dr. Patel's SUV faster along the highway. Behind them, the city receded into the distance. Ahead lay the mountains, a wilderness of forest and rock that might hide them, or might trap them with nowhere to run. And all around them, invisible but undeniable, the net was closing. The mountain roads grew steeper as they climbed higher, the SUV's engine straining against the incline. They had been driving for nearly 4 hours, stopping only once at a remote gas station where Jamie had paid cash and avoided the security cameras. During that brief stop, Ethan had searched the medical supplies bag and found exactly what he'd claimed would be there. Atlas's collar, cleaned of concrete and dirt, tucked into a plastic bag at the bottom. Now, with the collar sitting on her lap as she drove, Jamie couldn't stop staring at it in disbelief. It looked ordinary enough, worn leather with a simple metal tag, but when she'd examined it more closely at the gas station, she'd discovered what Ethan had described, a tiny seam along the inside, concealing a flattened compartment, and inside that compartment, a micro SD card no larger than her fingernail. We need a computer to read it, she'd told Ethan, tucking the tiny card into her wallet for safekeeping, and we need somewhere safe to stop. Atlas had directed them through Ethan, guiding them off the main highway onto progressively smaller roads that wound through dense forest. The German Shepherd was growing stronger by the hour, defying all medical expectations. When they'd stopped at the gas station, he'd been able to walk to a small grassy area to relieve himself, moving stiffly but deliberately. Now, he sat up in the back compartment, alert and watchful beside Ethan. Turn left at the next unmarked road, Ethan instructed, relaying Atlas's directions. It's not on maps. It leads to the lake. Jamie slowed, searching for what was apparently an unmarked turnoff. Ethan, are you sure Atlas remembers correctly? It could have been years since he was here. He remembers, Ethan said confidently. The woman scientist brought him here 3 times. It was the only place he ever felt safe. Jamie spotted it then. Not even a proper road, just a narrow dirt track cutting through the trees, easily missed if you weren't looking for it. She turned carefully, the SUV bouncing over the uneven surface. How much farther? She asked, wincing as branches scraped against the vehicle's sides. About 2 miles, Ethan replied after a pause, clearly communicating with Atlas. The cabin is hidden. We have to approach on foot for the last part. Jamie checked her watch nervously. It was nearly 3 p.m., and the mountain shadows were already lengthening. The last thing she wanted was to be stumbling through unfamiliar forest in the dark. The dirt track narrowed further, finally ending in a small clearing surrounded by dense pines. Beyond the trees, Jamie could see the glimmer of water, a lake, just as Atlas had indicated. We leave the car here, Ethan said, already helping Atlas climb out of the back compartment. The cabin is around the eastern shore, about half a mile. Jamie gathered their minimal supplies, the bag of medications, a few snacks and water bottles from the gas station, and her phone, though it hadn't had service for the past hour. Are you sure Atlas can walk that far? He just had surgery yesterday. As if in answer, Atlas stood straighter, his amber eyes fixed on the path ahead. Though still painfully thin, he carried himself with a dignity and purpose that belied his physical condition. "He says he can make it," Ethan translated. "He needs to show us something important at the cabin." They set off single file along a nearly invisible trail that hugged the lakeshore. Ethan walked beside Atlas, one hand resting lightly on the dog's back, supporting him when the terrain grew challenging. Jamie followed, constantly scanning their surroundings, jumping at every cracking twig or rustling leaf. The cabin appeared so suddenly that Jamie nearly gasped. It was perfectly camouflaged, built from local timber that had weathered to the exact shade of the surrounding forest, its roof covered with the same pine needles that carpeted the ground. Only the small dock extending into the lake gave any indication of human presence. "Atlas says to be careful," Ethan warned as they approached. The woman always checked for traps before entering. "Traps?" Jamie whispered, freezing in place. "What kind of traps?" Ethan tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. Not dangerous ones, just alarms, things that would tell her if someone had been here. Jamie watched in amazement as Atlas limped forward, sniffing methodically around the perimeter of the cabin. The dog moved with purpose, checking specific spots: a stack of firewood, a rain barrel, the hinges of the front door. After completing his inspection, Atlas returned to Ethan's side and made that strange modulated whining sound. "He says it's safe," Ethan translated. "No one has been here in a long time." The cabin door was locked, but Atlas led them to a fake rock beside the porch steps. Inside was a simple key that opened the rustic wooden door with a creak of disuse. The interior was Spartan but clean, a single room with a small kitchenette, a desk, a wood stove, and a narrow bed. A thick layer of dust covered every surface, confirming Atlas's assessment that no one had visited in quite some time. "The woman called it her thinking place," Ethan said, watching Atlas move directly to the desk. "She brought Atlas here when she was trying to decide what to do about the program." Jamie closed and locked the door behind them, drawing the simple curtains over the windows. "What was her name? Does Atlas remember?" Ethan shook his head. He knew her as handler Sarah. They weren't allowed to use last names at the facility. Atlas was pawing at the desk drawer now, trying to open it with his bandaged paw. Ethan moved to help him, pulling open the drawer to reveal several notebooks, a laptop computer, and a solar charger. "She left these here," Ethan said, placing his hand on the laptop. "In case she didn't make it out. Atlas was supposed to lead someone here, someone who could use the information." Jamie approached slowly, barely able to process what she was seeing. "You're telling me this scientist set up an insurance policy using a dog as a courier? That's smart," Ethan finished for her. "Dogs can go places people can't. They can escape when people can't. And no one would suspect Atlas was carrying important information." Jamie picked up one of the notebooks, flipping through pages of handwritten notes and diagrams. Most of it was scientific jargon she couldn't understand, but certain phrases jumped out. Neural bridging successful between canine subjects. Unexpected empathic transfer. Ethical violations in pediatric tests. "This is about the experiments," she whispered. "Actual documentation." Ethan was already setting up the laptop and solar charger by the window, where the late afternoon sun still provided enough light. The computer was old but appeared well maintained, with an external battery pack that still held some charge. As the laptop hummed to life, Atlas settled on the floor beside Ethan, his eyes never leaving the screen. The dog seemed to relax for the first time since they'd rescued him, as if completing this mission had been keeping him alive through sheer force of will. "Password protected," Jamie noted as the login screen appeared. "I don't suppose Atlas knows that too?" Ethan didn't smile at her weak joke. Instead, he reached out and typed a single word: redemption. The screen unlocked instantly. "How did you—" Jamie began, then stopped herself. By now, she should be used to Ethan knowing things he couldn't possibly know. "It's what she always whispered to Atlas before they worked together," Ethan explained, navigating through folders with surprising confidence. Her redemption for being part of it in the first place. Jamie watched it as Ethan opened file after file, documents, photographs, video clips, all meticulously organized and labeled. The contents made her stomach turn. Laboratory facilities where dogs were fitted with electronic devices attached to their skulls. Medical charts documenting neural response and empathic transference. Surveillance photos of military personnel entering and exiting a nondescript building in what looked like a remote desert location. What exactly was this program? Jamie asked, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. Ethan clicked on a video file labeled Project Overview. A woman appeared on screen, mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that looked haunted behind rimless glasses. "If you're watching this, then Atlas completed his mission," the woman began, her voice clinical despite the tension in her face. "My name is Dr. Sarah Winters. Until 3 weeks ago, I was the lead neurologist for Project Empathy, a classified DARPA initiative developing enhanced canine-human neural interfaces for military applications." Dr. Winters described how the project had begun with noble intentions, creating better service dogs for veterans with PTSD, developing more effective search and rescue animals. But as the technology advanced, military leadership had pushed for more aggressive applications. "We discovered that certain canine subjects, particularly German shepherds, could form unexpected neural bonds with humans when implanted with our prototype chips," Dr. Winters explained. "These bonds allowed for rudimentary thought transfer, emotions at first, then simple concepts, eventually something approaching direct communication." Jamie glanced at Ethan and Atlas, the boy's hand resting on the dog's head in exactly the spot where the chip had been implanted. Everything Dr. Winters was describing matched what they had experienced. The immediate connection, Ethan's ability to understand Atlas's thoughts, the dog's almost miraculous response to Ethan's presence. The breakthrough came when we discovered that children were significantly more receptive to these neural connections than adults, Dr. Winters continued, her voice growing more strained. Their developing brains adapted to the interface with remarkable speed and accuracy. That's when General Matthews took direct control of the program and changed its parameters. Dr. Winters described how the project had been moved to a remote facility, how additional subjects had been brought in, orphaned children from overseas, she suspected, though she'd never been given their full backgrounds. The experiments had become more invasive, pushing ethical boundaries as they attempted to create permanent neural links between specific dogs and children. "They're creating handlers who can deploy weaponized dogs with just their thoughts," Dr. Winters said, her clinical facade finally cracking as emotion bled through. "Children whose empathic connection to the animals makes them perfect controllers. Dogs who can be directed with absolute precision into combat situations. The perfect infiltration units. A child and dog who appear harmless but can execute military objectives with deadly efficiency." Jamie felt ill. She looked at Ethan, who was watching the video with an unnervingly calm expression. "Ethan, do you understand what she's talking about?" He nodded without taking his eyes from the screen. "Atlas has been showing me the training they did, the things they made the other dogs do." On screen, Dr. Winters was explaining her plan to expose the program. "I've compiled all the evidence, test results, video documentation, command chains, funding sources, everything needed to shut down Project Empathy permanently, but I can't go through official channels. Matthews has too much influence, too many allies and positions of power." She described how she had selected 3 dogs from the program, the ones showing the strongest empathic abilities, and surgically implanted them with evidence. Atlas, she explained, was the strongest, the one most likely to escape and find help. "I've programmed him to seek out Marcus Ramirez, a journalist who specializes in military whistleblower cases," Dr. Winters said. "If Atlas fails to find Marcus, he's been trained to approach any child between the ages of 4 and 12. The neural interface activates most readily with children in that age range, creating a connection that should guide both the child and Atlas to safety." The video ended abruptly with Dr. Winters looking over her shoulder, responding to a sound off camera. The screen went black, leaving Jamie and Ethan in stunned silence. "She didn't make it, did she?" Jamie finally asked. Ethan shook his head, his expression solemn beyond his years. "Atlas says they caught her the next day. He and the other 2 dogs managed to escape during transfer to a new facility. They separated to increase their chances. Atlas doesn't know what happened to the others." Jamie sat heavily on the edge of the bed, trying to process everything they'd learned. So, Atlas was trying to find this journalist, Marcus Ramirez, when someone caught him and cemented him into a wall. "Not someone," Ethan said, his voice eerily steady. "The cleanup team. Atlas says there are special military units that handle problems that can't be solved officially. They've been hunting all 3 dogs since the escape. And now they're hunting us," Jamie whispered. Ethan nodded, absently stroking Atlas's ears. "Because I connected with him. Because I can understand what he knows." Jamie pulled out her phone, staring at the no service message on the screen. We need to find this Marcus person. We need to get this information to someone who can help us. Atlas says there's a satellite phone in the cabinet above the sink, Ethan said. The woman, Dr. Winters, kept it for emergencies. Sure enough, when Jamie checked, she found an older model satellite phone and a charger. The battery was dead, but when she connected it to the solar charger, a red light indicated it was powering up. It'll take time to charge, she said, setting it on the windowsill where it could catch the last of the day's light. In the meantime, we should look through the rest of the files, see if there's contact information for this journalist. As Ethan continued searching through the laptop's contents, Jamie examined the cabin more thoroughly. It was well stocked, with non-perishable food, bottled water, first aid supplies, and even some clothes that looked like they might fit Ethan. Dr. Winters had prepared this place as a genuine hideout, a fallback position for exactly the scenario they now found themselves in. Atlas followed Jamie as she explored, limping but vigilant. Despite everything they'd learned, despite knowing that the dog had been altered with experimental technology, Jamie couldn't help feeling grateful for his presence. Whatever had been done to him, Atlas had used it to help others, to expose something terrible rather than participate in it. "Mom," Ethan called from the desk. "I found him." Jamie hurried over to see what Ethan had discovered. On the screen was a document containing contact information for various journalists, activists, and lawyers. Marcus Ramirez was at the top of the list, with multiple phone numbers, email addresses, and even GPS coordinates for a remote cabin, not unlike the one they were currently occupying. "He's a hermit," Ethan explained, reading from the notes Dr. Winters had included. "Doesn't trust technology, lives off the grid most of the time, but he has connections to major news outlets and government oversight committees." Jamie copied down the information on a scrap of paper. "As soon as the satellite phone is charged, we'll try to reach him. If that doesn't work, these coordinates look like they're about a day's drive from here." Atlas made his strange talking sound again, and Ethan listened intently before translating. "Atlas says we should leave tonight. The cleanup team has ways to track the chip in his head, but the mountains disrupt the signal. Still, they'll figure out the general area eventually." "Tonight?" Jamie looked out the window at the gathering darkness. "Ethan, we can't navigate these woods at night. It's too dangerous." "More dangerous than the people looking for us?" Ethan countered, with adult logic in a child's voice. "Atlas can guide us. Dogs see better than humans in the dark." Jamie weighed their options. The cabin felt safe, but it was also a dead end. One road in, the lake on the other side. If they were tracked here, there would be nowhere to run. "Let me check the maps," she said, finding a drawer of topographical charts that Dr. Winters had left behind. She spread one across the bed, tracing their location with her finger. "It looks like there's a forestry road about 2 miles north of here. If we could reach that, we might be able to flag down a passing vehicle, or at least have a better escape route than the way we came in." Atlas padded over to the map, examining it with uncanny intelligence. He placed his paw on a specific spot, looking up at Ethan expectantly. "He says there's a ranger station here," Ethan translated, pointing to where Atlas had indicated. "It has a radio we could use to call for help, about 3 miles northwest." Jamie studied the map more carefully. The ranger station wasn't marked, but there was a small structure indicated in roughly the location Atlas had shown. How does he know about this? "Dr. Winters brought him here during training," Ethan explained. "She wanted the dogs to know all possible resources in the area in case of emergency." The thoroughness of Dr. Winters' planning was both impressive and chilling. She had prepared for every contingency, trained Atlas for exactly this situation, knowing she might not survive to see her whistleblowing succeed. "All right," Jamie decided, folding the map and tucking it into her pocket. "We'll gather what supplies we can and head for the ranger station. If it has a working radio, we can call for help directly. If not, we'll continue to the forestry road." They worked quickly, filling a backpack with food, water, first aid supplies, and the all-important laptop and memory card from Atlas's collar. Jamie strapped the satellite phone to the outside of the pack, hoping it would continue charging from what ambient light remained. As they prepared to leave, Atlas suddenly froze, his ears perking up, body tensing. Ethan went completely still at the same moment, as if hearing whatever had alerted the dog. "Someone's coming," he whispered. "On the road. Multiple vehicles." Jamie hadn't heard anything, but she didn't question either of them. "How far?" "Maybe 10 minutes, Ethan said after conferring silently with Atlas. "They're moving carefully, trying to be quiet." "The back way," Jamie said, pointing toward the lake. "Is there a path along the shore to the ranger station?" Ethan nodded. "Atlas knows it. It's harder, but hidden." They slipped out the back door of the cabin, moving as silently as possible across the small clearing to the lake shore. The sun had set completely now. The forest plunged into darkness, broken only by slivers of moonlight reflecting off the water. Jamie clicked on the small flashlight from the emergency kit, keeping its beam pointed at the ground. Atlas took the lead, moving with surprising agility despite his injuries. Ethan followed closely behind the dog, and Jamie brought up the rear, constantly looking back for signs of pursuit. They had been walking for perhaps 15 minutes when the first shout echoed across the water. "They found the cabin," Ethan whispered unnecessarily. The distant beam of powerful flashlights cut through the trees behind them, sweeping the area they had vacated. Atlas increased his pace, no longer favoring his injured leg as adrenaline overrode pain. The path grew rougher, climbing away from the lake shore, up a rocky incline. Jamie struggled to keep up, her city shoes slipping on the uneven terrain. A sound like distant thunder rolled across the lake, but not thunder, Jamie realized with a jolt of fear. Helicopters. "They're bringing in air support," she gasped, pulling Ethan into the shelter of a large pine. "We need better cover!" Atlas veered off the path into denser forest, where the thick canopy would hide them from aerial spotlights. The going was slower here, the undergrowth catching at their clothes, branches slapping their faces in the darkness. But the sound of the helicopters grew fainter rather than stronger, suggesting they were moving in the right direction, away from the search pattern. They had been pushing through the wilderness for nearly an hour when Atlas suddenly stopped, growling low in his throat. Ethan froze beside him, reaching out to grip Jamie's arm in warning. "What is it?" she whispered, struggling to see anything in the near-total darkness beneath the trees. "Someone ahead," Ethan murmured. "Atlas smells them." Jamie extinguished the flashlight immediately, plunging them into blackness. She pulled Ethan and Atlas into a crouch behind a fallen log, straining her ears for any sound of approach. Minutes passed in tense silence. Then, so faint she almost missed it, came the crackle of a radio and a man's voice responding in clipped, professional tones. "Negative on Sector 4, moving to Checkpoint Bravo." The voice couldn't have been more than 50 yards ahead, directly in the path they needed to take to reach the ranger station. The search team had anticipated their route. Atlas nudged Ethan gently, making that strange communicative sound again. "He says we need to split up," Ethan translated, his voice barely audible. "They're tracking his chip. If he goes in a different direction, they'll follow him instead of us." "Absolutely not," Jamie hissed. "We're not separating. Mom, he can move faster alone. He knows these woods. He'll lead them away, then circle back to find us at the ranger station." Jamie shook her head vehemently, though she knew Ethan could barely see the gesture in the darkness. "He's injured, Ethan. He just had surgery yesterday. He can't outrun trained soldiers and helicopters." "He says he doesn't need to outrun them," Ethan insisted. "Just distract them long enough for us to reach the radio. Once we call for help, once people know what's happening, they won't be able to keep hunting us in secret." The logic was sound, but Jamie's heart rebelled against the plan. "Ethan, if they catch Atlas, they'll kill him," Ethan finished flatly. "He knows that. But if they catch all of us, everything Dr. Winters did will be for nothing. All those children and dogs will have suffered for nothing." The weight of responsibility settled on Jamie's shoulders like a physical burden. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about exposing a government program that had exploited vulnerable children and animals, about preventing more victims from suffering the same fate. "How will he find us again?" she asked, her voice breaking. "How will he know if we made it?" Ethan placed his hand on Atlas's head, right where the neural chip was implanted. "He'll know. He can feel me, Mom. As long as I'm alive, he can find me." The radio crackled again, closer this time. The search team was moving in their direction. "Okay," Jamie whispered, her throat tight with fear. "But, Atlas, you listen to me." She took the dog's face gently between her hands, looking directly into his amber eyes that somehow reflected what little light filtered through the trees. "You keep yourself alive. No heroics. Distract them, then run. Promise me." Atlas licked her hand once, a gesture so ordinary, so dog-like, that it nearly broke her heart. Then he turned to Ethan, touching his muzzle to the boy's forehead in what could only be described as a blessing or a goodbye. Without another sound, the German shepherd slipped away into the darkness, his pale form visible for just a moment before the forest swallowed him completely. Northeast, Ethan whispered, pointing in the opposite direction from where Atlas had disappeared. The ranger station is that way. Less than a mile now. They moved as quickly and quietly as possible through the underbrush, Jamie holding tightly to Ethan's hand. Behind them, sudden shouts and the beam of flashlights indicated that the search team had detected Atlas's movement. They're following him, Ethan confirmed, his voice tight with anxiety despite his earlier confidence in the plan. He's running along the ridgeline, making sure they see him. How do you know? Jamie asked, though by now she should have stopped questioning the connection between her son and the dog. I can see through his eyes sometimes, Ethan admitted, when he lets me. He's showing me what he sees, so I know he's okay. They pushed on through the forest, guided only by Ethan's unwavering sense of direction and the occasional glimpse of stars when the canopy thinned. The sounds of pursuit grew more distant as Atlas led the search team away from their position. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only 40 minutes, they emerged into a small clearing. In the center stood a square utilitarian building, the ranger station, exactly where Atlas had indicated it would be. It looks abandoned, Jamie said, approaching cautiously. The windows were dark, the small parking area empty. It's the off-season, Ethan explained. Atlas says they only staff it during summer months, but the emergency radio should still work. The door was locked, but Jamie found a key under a fake rock similar to the one at Dr. Winters' cabin. Apparently the doctor had ensured access to this backup location as well. Inside, the station was dusty but intact, with basic furniture, maps on the walls, and most importantly, a radio set up on a desk by the window. Let me check if it works, Jamie said, examining the equipment. It was an older model, but appeared well maintained. She flipped the power switch, and to her immense relief, lights flickered on the control panel. It has backup solar power, Ethan observed, pointing to cables leading outside to what must be panels on the roof. Jamie picked up the handset, adjusting the frequency to the emergency channel listed on a laminated card beside the radio. This is an emergency call from Blackwater Lake Ranger Station, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Is anyone receiving? Static answered her. She repeated the call, adjusting the frequency slightly, trying different channels listed on the card. After several attempts, a crackly voice responded. This is Park Service Dispatch. Identify yourself and state the nature of your emergency. Jamie nearly sobbed with relief. My name is Jamie Parker. I'm at the Blackwater Lake Ranger Station with my team. We need immediate assistance. We're being pursued by armed men. We have evidence of illegal government experiments involving children. A pause, then, say again? Did you say armed pursuers? Yes, Jamie said firmly. We need you to contact FBI agent Marcus Ramirez. He's a former journalist who specializes in whistleblower cases. This is a matter of national security. Another pause, longer this time. Stay on frequency. I'm connecting you to state police and alerting the nearest ranger unit. ETA approximately 45 minutes to your location. Can you remain secure until then? I think so, Jamie said, glancing at the solid door and windows of the ranger station. But please, it's crucial that you also contact Marcus Ramirez. We have evidence that needs to reach him specifically. Understood. Stay on the line if possible. Help is coming. Jamie set down the handset, leaving the channel open as instructed. She turned to Ethan, who was standing by the window, looking out into the darkness. They're sending help. We just need to hold out for about 45 minutes. Ethan didn't respond. His face was a mask of concentration, his eyes unfocused. Ethan, what's wrong? Atlas, he whispered. He's in trouble. Jamie joined him at the window, though she knew she wouldn't be able to see whatever Ethan was perceiving. What's happening? They've got him cornered by the lake. He can't swim with his injuries. Ethan's voice was distant, as if he was simultaneously present and miles away. There are 5 men. They have guns with special darts, tranquilizers. They want to take him alive. Jamie put her arm around Ethan's shoulders. He's smart. He'll find a way out. He's tired, Mom. He's hurting. The chip connection is making him weak. Tears began to stream down Ethan's face, though his expression remained oddly blank. He's showing me the evidence again, making sure I remember everything, just in case. A chill ran through Jamie. Ethan, what is Atlas planning to do? Instead of answering, Ethan suddenly gasped, his body jerking as if struck. No, he cried out. Atlas, don't! In that moment, the radio crackled to life again. Mrs. Parker, this is dispatch. We've got state police and park rangers en route to your location. They have been instructed to approach with caution due to your report of armed individuals in the area. Can you give us any more information about these pursuers? Jamie picked up the handset, keeping one arm around Ethan, who was still locked in his distant connection with Atlas. They're military, I think, or some kind of government special operations team. They're hunting us because we have evidence of illegal experiments conducted by a DARPA program called Project Empathy. DARPA? The dispatcher repeated. That's a military research agency, correct? Yes. The evidence is on a laptop and memory card we have with us. It documents experiments on children and animals, neural interface technology being developed for military applications. The line went silent for several seconds before the dispatcher responded. Mrs. Parker, I've been instructed to keep you on the line until help arrives. The FBI has been notified and is sending agents from their nearest field office. What about Marcus Ramirez? Did you contact him? Another pause. We're working on locating Mr. Ramirez now. Please remain where you are, and... The radio suddenly emitted a high-pitched squeal, then went dead. At the same moment, the lights in the ranger station flickered and died. They're jamming us, Jamie realized, moving away from the window into the darker recesses of the room. Ethan, get down! But Ethan remained rooted in place, his eyes wide and unfocused. Atlas, he whispered, I can see the water. I can feel the cold. Jamie grabbed her son's shoulders. Ethan, listen to me. We need to hide, now. He jumped, Mom, Ethan said, his voice breaking. Atlas jumped into the lake. He's swimming away from them, but he's so weak. The water's so cold. He's a strong dog, Jamie insisted, pulling Ethan toward a storage closet she'd noticed earlier. He'll make it. I can't feel him anymore, Ethan whispered as she guided him into the closet. The connection is fading. I think he's going under. Jamie held her son close in the darkness of the closet, feeling his small body shake with silent sobs. Outside, the faint sound of helicopter rotors grew steadily louder. Their 45-minute window had just shrunk dramatically. Even if they catch us, she whispered into Ethan's ear, they can't take back what we've done. The authorities know now. The secret is out. Ethan shook his head against her shoulder. They'll say we're crazy. They'll hide the evidence. They'll make us disappear just like they did with Atlas. The brutal logic of a 4-year-old cut through Jamie's attempts at reassurance. Of course Ethan was right. These people had cemented a dog into a wall and left it to die slowly. They had experimented on children. They had likely killed Dr. Winters when she tried to expose them. What wouldn't they do to protect their program? The sound of the helicopter was directly overhead now, powerful searchlights sweeping across the ranger station windows. Car engines approached from the access road, but whether they belonged to the state police coming to help or the cleanup team coming to silence them, Jamie had no way of knowing. In the suffocating darkness of the closet, with her son clutched tightly against her, Jamie closed her eyes and thought of Atlas, the dog who had endured torture and entombment, who had fought through impossible odds to complete his mission, who had sacrificed himself to give them this chance. Stay with me, Ethan, she whispered, feeling him tremble against her. Whatever happens, stay with me. Outside, car doors slammed. Heavy boots pounded up the steps to the ranger station. The door burst open with a crash of splintering wood. And in that moment, as voices shouted commands and flashlight beams cut through the darkness, Ethan suddenly went rigid in Jamie's arms. His eyes flew open, fixing on something only he could see. He's alive, he whispered, wonder breaking through his terror. Atlas is alive, and he's not alone. Bright light flooded the closet as the door was yanked open. Jamie pulled Ethan against her chest, shielding him with her body, as she squinted against the blinding flashlight beam. Federal agents, shouted a deep voice. Come out slowly with your hands visible. Jamie hesitated, her mind racing. Federal agents? Or was this the cleanup team, using official-sounding language to trick them into surrendering? My son is with me, she called back, stalling for time. He's only 4 years old. Please don't frighten him. The flashlight lowered slightly, illuminating rather than blinding. Mrs. Parker, Jamie Parker, the voice softened marginally. I'm Special Agent Donovan with the FBI. We received your distress call through Park Services. Are you armed? No, Jamie answered, still not moving from her protective position. But I need verification that you're really FBI. The people hunting us have government connections. There was a pause, then the sound of a radio clicking. Sierra team, hold positions outside. All units maintain perimeter. The flashlight beam moved away as the man stepped back. "Mrs. Parker, I'm going to set my credentials on the floor where you can see them. Then step back. Take your time." True to his word, a leather wallet appeared in the doorway, flipped open to display a badge and ID card. Jamie studied it without moving, still unsure. "Mom," Ethan whispered urgently, "Atlas says it's okay. They're really FBI. The other men are still by the lake." Jamie looked down and at her son in surprise. "You can feel Atlas again?" Ethan nodded, his eyes distant. "He made it to the other side of the lake. Someone found him, someone good. They're bringing him here." Jamie didn't understand how Ethan could know this, but after everything they'd experienced in the past 36 hours, she wasn't about to question it. Slowly, she released her grip on Ethan and reached for the FBI credentials, examining them carefully. "Agent Donovan," she acknowledged, finally emerging from the closet with Ethan close behind her. "Thank you for coming so quickly." The man standing before them was tall and solidly built, with close-cropped gray hair and the weathered face of someone who spent considerable time outdoors. He wore a tactical vest over plain clothes, with an FBI insignia clearly visible. "You're taking quite a risk," he said, holstering his weapon as two other agents secured the ranger station. "Your call mentioned armed pursuers and government experiments?" Jamie nodded, retrieving their backpack from where she'd hidden it beneath a desk. "It's all documented here. A DARPA program called Project Empathy, experimenting on dogs and children with neural interface technology." Donovan's expression remained professional, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. "And you obtained this information how, exactly?" Before Jamie could answer, Ethan spoke up. "From Atlas. He's a German shepherd who escaped from the program. He has a neural chip in his head that lets him communicate with me. The scientist who helped him escape put all the evidence inside his collar." Donovan crouched down to Ethan's level, his expression softening. "That's quite a story, son. And this Atlas, he's the dog that was with you?" "He led the bad men away so we could get help," Ethan confirmed. "He jumped in the lake when they cornered him, but he made it across. Someone found him on the other shore." Donovan exchanged glances with one of his colleagues, a silent communication that Jamie couldn't interpret. "Mrs. Parker," he said, standing back up, "we need to get you and your son to a secure location. My team reports activity on the north side of the lake, multiple vehicles, and what appears to be a tactical team conducting a search operation." "The cleanup crew," Jamie said grimly. "That's what Atlas called them. They're the ones who cemented him into a wall when he escaped the first time." Donovan's eyebrows rose slightly, but he maintained his professional demeanor. "We have a helicopter landing site about half a mile from here. We can extract you immediately to our field office in Denver." "What about Atlas?" Ethan demanded, a hint of his earlier determination returning. "We're not leaving without him." Donovan looked uncomfortable. "Son, if there's a dog out there, we'll do our best to find him, but right now our priority is your safety." "He's coming here," Ethan insisted, "with the man who found him. They're close." As if on cue, one of the agents by the window called out, "Movement in the trees to the south. Single individual approaching with what appears to be a dog." "Hold fire," Donovan ordered sharply. "Maintain positions and illuminate the approach." Powerful flashlight beams cut through the darkness outside, highlighting the trees at the edge of the clearing. After a tense moment, a figure emerged from the forest, a man in his 50s, with a wild gray beard and flannel shirt, supporting a limping, soaking wet German shepherd. "Atlas!" Ethan cried, breaking away from Jamie and running toward the door before anyone could stop him. "Ethan, wait!" Jamie called, chasing after him, with Agent Donovan close behind. Outside, the night air was filled with the distant thrum of helicopter rotors and the nearer sound of the German shepherd's labored breathing as he struggled toward Ethan. Despite his obvious exhaustion and pain, Atlas's tail wagged weakly when he saw the boy. Ethan dropped to his knees in front of the dog, wrapping his arms carefully around Atlas's dripping neck. "You made it," he whispered. "I knew you would." The bearded man supporting Atlas looked at the assembled FBI agents with clear suspicion. "Found this dog half drowned on my side of the lake," he said gruffly. "Then he started dragging me here like Lassie with a mission. Figured something was up." "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back from the child and the dog," Donovan said, his hand moving toward his weapon. "No!" Ethan shouted, still clutching Atlas. "He helped Atlas. He's a friend." The bearded man snorted. "Friend is stretching it, kid. Name's Marcus. I live on the other side of the lake, like my privacy. His sharp eyes took in the scene. The FBI agents, the ranger station, Jamie hovering protectively near Ethan. But something tells me my quiet night just got complicated. Jamie's breath caught in her throat. Marcus? Marcus Ramirez? The man's posture changed instantly, his hand moving to his waistband where Jamie suspected a weapon was concealed. Who's asking? Sarah Winters sent us, Jamie said quickly. Or rather, she sent Atlas to find you. We have everything. All her documentation of Project Empathy, the evidence she collected. Marcus went very still, his eyes darting between Jamie, Ethan, and the FBI agents. Sarah sent a dog to find me? She implanted him with evidence, Jamie explained, approaching slowly. She trained him to seek you out if anything happened to her. Atlas made his strange modulated whining sound, the closest thing to speech his damaged vocal cords could manage. Marcus looked down at the dog with new understanding, then back at Jamie. Where is Sarah now? He asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Dead, Jamie said quietly. At least that's what Atlas told Ethan. She was caught right after helping him escape. Marcus closed his eyes briefly, a flash of pain crossing his weathered face. I warned her it was too dangerous. Told her to bring me the evidence directly, not try to collect more. He looked at Atlas with newfound respect. She always was too clever for her own good. Excuse me, Donovan interrupted, clearly struggling to follow the conversation. Mr. Ramirez, you're the former journalist specializing in whistleblower cases, the one Mrs. Parker was trying to contact? Marcus nodded curtly. Retired. Or I was. He gestured to Atlas. Until this brave soul showed up on my doorstep. Ethan was still kneeling beside Atlas, one hand placed gently on the exact spot where the neural chip was implanted. The dog's amber eyes were fixed on the boy's face with unmistakable intelligence and connection. He's telling me everything, Ethan said, his voice taking on that uncanny adult quality Jamie had noticed before. About Dr. Winters, about the facility, about the others who didn't make it out. Donovan watched this exchange with visible discomfort. Mrs. Parker, we really need to get you and your son to safety. Our analysts can examine your evidence once we're secure. No, Marcus said firmly. Your analysts don't get first crack at this. I have my own secure channels, people who can't be silenced or bought off. Mr. Ramirez, Donovan began, his tone hardening. Don't Mr. Ramirez me, Marcus cut in. I've been investigating Black Ops projects for 30 years. I know exactly how evidence disappears once it enters official channels, especially when it implicates people with stars on their shoulders. The standoff might have continued, but Atlas suddenly tensed, his head coming up sharply as he stared into the darkness beyond the ranger station's lights. A low growl emerged from his throat, not the communicative sound he made with Ethan, but a warning. We've got company, Marcus said, reaching for something beneath his jacket. North perimeter, moving fast. Donovan immediately snapped into action, ordering his team to defensive positions. Mrs. Parker, get your son inside, now! But Ethan refused to move, still kneeling beside Atlas. We can't fight them, he said in that unnerving adult voice. There are too many, and they have orders to recover Atlas at any cost, dead or alive. How could you possibly know that? Donovan demanded. Because I can hear them, Ethan replied, tapping his temple. Through Atlas. The chip works both ways. He can hear their communications when they're close enough. The cleanup team has military-grade neural receivers. They know he's alive. They know he's with us. Before anyone could respond to this extraordinary statement, a new sound cut through the night, the distinctive whoomp-whoomp of helicopter rotors, much closer than before, accompanied by blinding searchlights sweeping across the clearing. FBI transport? Jamie asked hopefully. Donovan shook his head, his expression grim. Not ours. Ours is still 5 minutes out. The helicopter hovering above them now bore no markings, its black surface absorbing rather than reflecting light. As they watched, a voice boomed from speakers mounted on its underside. Attention FBI personnel, this is a national security matter. Stand down and prepare to transfer custody of subjects. Donovan grabbed his radio. This is Special Agent Donovan, FBI. Identify yourself and your authority. The response came immediately. This operation falls under Executive Order 13526. Stand down or face prosecution. Marcus spat on the ground. Classified information pretext. They're covering their tracks. Donovan looked conflicted, torn between his duty to protect Jamie and Ethan and the apparent legal authority of the unmarked helicopter. "Mrs. Parker, do you have the evidence with you right now?" Jamie patted the backpack slung over her shoulder. "Everything, the laptop, the memory card, all of it." Donovan made a swift decision. "Jeffries Conrad, escort Mrs. Parker and her son to our extraction point now. Use the South Trail, away from the approaching team." "What about Atlas?" Ethan demanded, still clutching the dog. "The dog goes with you," Donovan said firmly. "Mr. Ramirez, you're welcome to accompany them if you wish." Marcus nodded grimly. "Wouldn't miss it." "And you, sir?" Jamie asked Donovan. The FBI agent checked his weapon. "My team and I are going to have a conversation with our friends in the helicopter about jurisdiction and proper identification procedures. Should buy you about 10 minutes. The helicopter's searchlight fixed on their position. Its beam so powerful it turned night into artificial day. From the north side of the clearing came the sound of breaking branches and hushed commands. The cleanup team, moving into position. "Go now," Donovan urged, positioning himself between them and the approaching forces. "Our extraction point is marked on this." He handed Jamie a small GPS unit, 1/2 mile southeast. "The pilot has orders to wait 5 minutes, then leave with whoever's on board." Jamie gripped his arm. "Thank you." Donovan nodded once, then turned to face the helicopter, his team forming a protective line as Jamie, Ethan, Marcus, and Atlas slipped into the darkness of the forest with the 2 FBI agents as escorts. They moved as quickly as Atlas's condition allowed, the dog limping but determined, his eyes fixed forward as if he could see their destination through the darkness. Behind them, raised voices echoed from the ranger station, Donovan confronting whoever had emerged from the helicopter. "They're stalling," Marcus observed grimly. "The cleanup team is splitting up, trying to flank us." Jamie didn't bother asking how he knew this. Between Atlas's strange abilities and Marcus's obvious experience with covert operations, she simply accepted that they were being hunted by professionals who would stop at nothing to silence them. The forest grew denser as they moved away from the lake, the canopy blocking what little moonlight filtered through the clouds. Their FBI escorts moved with practiced efficiency, one taking point, the other guarding their rear, both scanning constantly for threats. 200 meters to extraction, the agent in front murmured, checking the identical GPS unit to the one Donovan had given Jamie. That was when the first shot rang out, a sharp crack followed by the thud of a body falling. Their rear guard dropped it without a sound, a small dart protruding from his neck. "Tranquilizer," Marcus hissed, pulling Jamie and Ethan behind a large tree. "They're trying to take us alive." The remaining FBI agent took a defensive position, his weapon drawn. "Keep moving to the extraction point," he ordered in a harsh whisper. "I'll hold them here." "You'll be outnumbered," Jamie protested. The agent's grim smile was barely visible in the darkness. "That's why they pay me the big bucks, ma'am. Now go." Atlas nudged Ethan urgently, clearly understanding the danger. The boy nodded, gripping Jamie's hand. "This way," he whispered, suddenly taking the lead. "Atlas knows a faster route." They left the FBI agent covering their retreat, moving deeper into the forest in a direction that didn't quite match the GPS coordinates. Jamie wanted to object, to insist they follow Donovan's instructions, but the certainty in Ethan's voice stopped her. Her son hadn't led them wrong yet. More shots sounded behind them, real gunfire now, not just tranquilizer darts. The remaining FBI agent was engaging the cleanup team, buying them precious seconds with his life. They ran as best they could, Atlas pushing through his pain, Marcus bringing up the rear with what Jamie now saw was a very illegal-looking handgun. The forest blurred around them, branches slapping their faces, roots threatening to trip them with every step. There, Ethan suddenly pointed ahead, where the trees thinned to reveal a small clearing. In its center, visible only by its running lights, sat a helicopter, smaller than the unmarked one at the ranger station, but unmistakably their extraction transport. They broke from the tree line at a dead run, abandoning all pretense of stealth. The pilot saw them coming and spun up the rotors, the engine whine increasing as they approached. 20 yards from safety, Atlas suddenly stopped, his head snapping around to face the way they had come. His hackles rose as he emitted a warning growl that needed no translation. "They're right behind us," Marcus confirmed, positioning himself between them and the forest. "Get to the chopper, now!" Jamie pulled Ethan toward the helicopter, but the boy refused to move, his hand still gripping Atlas's fur. "He's not coming with us," he said, his voice breaking with the realization. He can't. What? Of course he is, Jamie insisted, tugging harder. Ethan shook his head, tears streaming down his face. The chip, Mom. They can track it. If he comes with us, they'll follow. They'll never stop hunting us. The horrible logic of it hit Jamie like a physical blow. As long as Atlas carried the experimental neural chip, he would be a homing beacon leading the cleanup team directly to them. We can remove it, she suggested desperately. Once we're safe, we can find a veterinarian to... It's fused to his brain, Ethan interrupted, the knowledge clearly coming from Atlas himself. Removing it would kill him. From the forest came the sound of approaching footsteps, multiple pursuers, moving fast, no longer bothering with stealth. Make a decision, Marcus urged, his weapon trained on the tree line. We're out of time. Ethan knelt in front of Atlas, taking the dog's face between his small hands just as Jamie had done earlier. You knew all along, he said softly. You knew you couldn't come with us. Atlas made his strange talking sound one more time, a modulated whine that somehow conveyed everything words could not. He licked Ethan's cheek, then gently but firmly pushed the boy toward the helicopter with his muzzle. He wants us to go, Ethan translated, his voice thick with tears. He says his mission was always to get the evidence to safety, to make sure what happened to him and the others wasn't forgotten. Jamie felt her heart breaking for her son, for this extraordinary dog who had endured so much and asked for so little in return. Atlas, there has to be another way. The German Shepherd looked at her with those intelligent amber eyes, and for a moment, Jamie almost believed she could hear him too. His determination, his certainty, his absolute commitment to protecting Ethan at any cost. He's staying with me, Marcus announced suddenly, moving to stand beside Atlas. I've got a fortified cabin on the other side of the lake, underground shelter, off the grid. They won't find us easily, and if they do, he patted his weapon meaningfully. But they'll keep hunting him, Jamie protested. Marcus smiled grimly. Let them. I've been waiting for a story like this for 30 years. Solid evidence of Black Ops experimentation on American soil. I'll make sure the right people get copies of everything, through channels these bastards can't block. The pilot leaned out of the helicopter, shouting over the roar of the rotors. 30 seconds, then I'm gone, with or without you. Jamie looked at Marcus, at Atlas, at her son's tear-streaked face. How will we know if you succeed, if the story gets out? Oh, you'll know, Marcus promised. Every newspaper, every news channel, every online outlet in the country will carry it. The kind of bombshell even modern attention spans can't ignore. He reached out, gripping Jamie's shoulder firmly. Now go. Let Atlas complete his mission. Let Sarah's sacrifice mean something. The decision was made for them, as flashlight beams cut through the trees at the edge of the clearing. The cleanup team had found them. Run, Marcus shouted, dropping to one knee beside Atlas, his weapon raised. Jamie grabbed Ethan, physically lifting him, despite his struggles as she ran for the helicopter. He's making his choice, she told her son fiercely. Honor it by making sure the truth gets out. As they reached the helicopter, Jamie risked one last look back. Atlas stood beside Marcus, his posture no longer that of an injured, traumatized animal, but of a soldier prepared to make his stand. The German Shepherd's eyes found Ethan's across the clearing, and something passed between them. A final communication, a goodbye, a promise. Then they were inside the helicopter, the door sliding shut as the pilot immediately lifted off. Through the window, Jamie and Ethan watched as the cleanup team burst into the clearing, weapons raised. They watched as Marcus and Atlas disappeared behind a line of trees, drawing the pursuers away from the rising helicopter. And then they were above the forest canopy, banking sharply away from the lake, from the ranger station, from the brave dog and the reclusive journalist who had given them their chance at escape. Ethan sat in stunned silence as the helicopter sped through the night, his hand pressed to his temple where the neural connection with Atlas had been strongest. Jamie held him close, having no words that could possibly ease the pain of this separation. I can still feel him, Ethan whispered after several minutes. It's faint, but there, he's running. He's leading them away from Marcus's cabin. Jamie wanted to tell her son that it was just his imagination, that the neural connection couldn't possibly work over such a distance. But after everything they had witnessed, who was she to say what was possible? He's not afraid anymore, Ethan continued, his eyes closed in concentration. He thinks they might catch him eventually, but it doesn't matter. The evidence is safe with us. Dr. Winter's work wasn't for nothing. Jamie smoothed Ethan's hair, her heart breaking for her son, for Atlas, for all the victims of Project Empathy whose stories were contained in the laptop and memory card they carried. "We'll make sure of it," she promised. "We'll make sure everyone knows what happened." The helicopter flew on through the darkness, carrying them toward Denver, toward safety, toward a future neither of them could have imagined 48 hours earlier when they'd set out for a simple nature walk. 3 weeks later, Jamie sat in a secure apartment provided by the FBI's Witness Protection Program, watching Ethan carefully arrange his colored pencils as he worked on his latest drawing. Despite everything they had been through, despite the ongoing debriefings and the uncertainty of their future, her son was healing in ways she hadn't thought possible. The night they'd escaped, Ethan had cried himself to sleep, his connection with Atlas growing fainter until he could no longer feel the dog's presence. Jamie had feared he would retreat back into his shell, become once again the withdrawn, silent child he'd been before their extraordinary encounter. Instead, something unexpected had happened. Ethan had begun to talk, really talk, not just to Jamie, but to the FBI agents, the prosecutors, the child psychologists assigned to their case. It was as if Atlas had awakened something in him that couldn't be silenced again, a confidence and clarity that transcended his 4 years. The neural connection changed him, one specialist had explained after examining Ethan. Not physically, there's no sign of any technological alteration, but psychologically. Whatever link he formed with that dog reshaped his neural pathways in a way we don't fully understand. What they did understand, what nobody could deny, was the evidence Jamie and Ethan had brought out of the mountains. Dr. Winter's documentation was comprehensive and damning. Internal memos, experimental results, video footage, funding authorizations with the signatures of high-ranking military and government officials. The initial response had been predictable: denial, attempts to discredit, claims of national security. But Marcus had been as good as his word. Copies of the evidence had appeared simultaneously in the hands of multiple journalists, congressional oversight committees, and international human rights organizations. The television in the corner of their apartment was muted, but Jamie could see the familiar images on the screen. Protesters outside military installations, congressional hearings where grim-faced generals and bureaucrats faced brutal questioning, headlines about the empathy files dominating every news outlet. What she didn't see, what she watched for every day, was any mention of Marcus Ramirez or a German shepherd named Atlas. Whether they had escaped or been captured remained unknown. Jamie had asked their FBI handlers repeatedly, but received only non-committal responses. The area had been searched, no bodies found, investigation ongoing. "Mom, look," Ethan called, holding up his latest drawing. "I finished it." Jamie crossed the room to examine her son's artwork. The skill level was beyond what any 4-year-old should be capable of, another unexplained effect of his neural connection with Atlas. This drawing showed a German shepherd standing on a mountainside, looking out over a vast landscape of forests and lakes. Beside the dog stood a bearded man with a rifle slung over his shoulder, and in the sky above them, barely visible among the clouds, soared what looked like a hawk. "It's beautiful, honey," Jamie said, studying the surprisingly detailed landscape. "Is that Atlas and Marcus?" Ethan nodded, adding a few final touches to the hawk. "Atlas says they're safe. They move around a lot so the bad men can't find them, but they're watching the news. They know we did it." Jamie had stopped questioning these statements from her son. The doctors had suggested that Ethan was processing his trauma through an imagined continued connection with Atlas, a coping mechanism rather than a genuine neural link. It was healthier, they advised, to accept his statements at face value rather than challenge them. But sometimes, like now, Jamie wondered. The landscape in Ethan's drawing looked eerily specific. A particular mountain range, a distinctive lake shape, details he couldn't have known or remembered from their brief time in the wilderness. "How is Atlas feeling?" she asked, playing along with what the doctors called Ethan's therapeutic narrative. "Better," Ethan said, setting down his pencils with precise care. "His legs still hurt sometimes, but he can run fast again. And he's not so skinny anymore. Marcus feeds him good food and lets him sleep on the bed." Jamie smiled, imaging the gruff journalist sharing his bed with the battle-scarred German shepherd. "That's nice of him." Ethan's next words came in that uncanny adult tone that still sometimes emerged when he talked about Atlas. "They're coming home soon, not to stay. It's not safe yet, but to visit. Atlas wants to see me again, to make sure I'm okay. A chill ran down Jamie's spine. Ethan, honey, you know that's not possible, right? We're in witness protection. No one knows where we are. Her son looked at her, with those old eyes in his young face. Atlas knows. He'll always know where I am. He tapped his temple, just as he had in the forest. The connection works both ways, remember? Before Jamie could respond, her phone buzzed with a text message. It was from their FBI handler, a daily check-in, usually just confirming that they were safe and had everything they needed. But today's message was different. Turn on the news, Channel 7, now. Jamie grabbed the remote, unmuting the television and switching to the specified channel. Breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom of the screen as a serious-faced anchor spoke directly to the camera. An exclusive interview with Marcus Ramirez, the former investigative journalist who first broke the Empathy Files story. After weeks in hiding, Ramirez has provided this network with additional documentation and his first-hand account of the government program that illegally experimented on both animals and children. We want to warn viewers that some of the images you're about to see are disturbing. The screen cut to a pre-recorded interview. Marcus, looking thinner but as intense as ever, sitting in what appeared to be a nondescript hotel room. And beside him, alert and watchful, sat Atlas. The German Shepherd looked transformed from the emaciated, wounded animal they had rescued from the concrete wall. His coat was glossy, his body filled out, his amber eyes clear and intelligent. A scar was visible on his shoulder, where Dr. Patel had operated, and his left ear bore a notch that hadn't been there before, a souvenir, perhaps, from whatever confrontation had occurred in the forest clearing. Jamie sank onto the couch, her heart pounding. They had made it. Against all odds, Atlas and Marcus had survived, had evaded capture, had continued the fight. "Mom," Ethan whispered, his eyes fixed on the screen where Atlas sat proudly beside Marcus. "He's looking for us. He wants us to know they're okay." And indeed, as the camera zoomed in for a close-up, the German Shepherd seemed to be looking directly into the lens, his expression uncannily human in its intentionality. For a brief moment, as Marcus spoke about the evidence and the ongoing investigation, Atlas tilted his head slightly and made a subtle movement with his muzzle, a gesture so small that no casual viewer would notice it. But Ethan noticed. He gasped softly, his hand flying to his mouth. "Did you see that? He said hello." Jamie put her arm around her son, drawing him close as they watched the interview unfold. She didn't question how Atlas could say hello through a television broadcast, or how Ethan could possibly interpret a subtle head tilt as a greeting. Some things defied explanation, transcended normal understanding. What mattered was that they had all survived. What mattered was that the truth was out, that Project Empathy was being dismantled, that the children and animals who had suffered would receive justice. What mattered was that her son, once silent and withdrawn, now spoke with confidence and compassion. As the interview concluded, the camera pulled back to show Marcus with his hand resting on Atlas's back, exactly where the neural chip was implanted. The German Shepherd looked directly into the camera one last time, his amber eyes seeming to pierce the digital divide between them. "He says it's not the end," Ethan translated softly. "It's just the beginning." Jamie pulled her son closer, watching as Atlas and Marcus faded from the screen, replaced by commentators analyzing the latest revelations. She didn't know what the future held for them, for the brave dog who had changed their lives, for the truth they had helped expose. But as Ethan leaned against her, peaceful and confident, in a way he hadn't been before their extraordinary encounter, Jamie knew one thing with absolute certainty. Some connections transcended physical distance, transcended rational explanation, transcended even the boundary between species. Some bonds, once formed, could never truly be broken. Like, share, and don't forget to comment where you're watching from. Because sometimes, the most incredible stories are the ones that remind us how connected we all truly are.